everyone, and welcome to the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players. I'm your host, David Holloway, and I'm pumped as always to be here with you. As you can see, there's a much handsomer face next to me, unlike Paul Bindiggs, and I know Paul will get the humour of that. Mr. Joe Mascara, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you, David?
Good. It's a pleasure to have you on as a guest co-host. So for our regular viewers and listeners, Paul is actually jetting off on a month-long, well-deserved holiday, as you will have heard us discuss in the live stream if you tuned in for that. So hope you're having a ball, Paul. And that rhymes. It's wonderful to have Joe here. And there are two reasons I'm thrilled to have Joe here. Number one, because regular listeners and viewers may have heard us mention the fact that Joe does listen to the end of every episode. So he's a completionist, which is always appreciated. But also, Joe is a major fan of the band that was co-founded by our next guest, Mr. Bill Payne. So Little Feat is an iconic band, one of those, in iconic bands from the last 50 years that are still going strong. Bill was a co-founder. We spend quite a bit of time, Joe, don't we, talking with Bill about the amazing career he's had.
Yeah, it was fascinating.
In part one of this interview, we cover off what has occurred in the last tour. We cover a whole range of other territory, the upcoming tour, and then in part two, there's a lot of history covered, which is wonderful, and a lot of our standard questions that Bill has some really great perspectives on, and some great guidance for new players. A great train wreck and much more. So we'll see you at the end for a bit more of a chat. Bill, it's an honour and a privilege to have you on the show. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fine. It's lovely to be talking to a couple of people in disparate parts of the world. So it's fun. Thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks
no, great. Wonderful to have you here. So I thought we'd start off with Bill, with just talking about what's been going on for you most recently.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the current incarnation of the band. I saw you guys here last year in Houston, and that was a great show. Okay. And the band was tight, and I listened to the recording of the show all the time. You guys have two new members now, right? Tony Leone on drums and vocals, and Scott Sherrard on guitar and vocals. And can you tell us how it came about that you added them to the band? Did you have auditions? Did you know those guys from previous, playing, seeing them around and what?
Yeah, I met Scott Sherrard on a Doobie Brothers tour. He was the musical director for Greg Allman. And I sat in with him a couple nights in Greg's band. And so I didn't really get to know Scott, but that's where I met him, ostensibly. In 2019, we were doing the 50th year tour for an anniversary of Little Feat. Toward the end of that tour, which was in October, Paul Barrere was unable to join us. He'd been with us the entire year, unable to join us. We had Larry Teresa and Larry Campbell playing with us. But the last two shows they couldn't make, and we had Scott Sherrard come in. And the first of those two shows, which was back east in, I think, New York, not New York City, but in New York State, Paul passed away. So it was a heck of an introduction for Scott. He played beautifully. We were going to play I did play in Jamaica in 2020. January, and we brought him down there, and he sounded great. I would say about 8 months later, I knew Tony Leone from having played with Larry and Teresa. He's also played with Chris Robinson and the Brotherhood. He played drums when Levon was, for a short while, not able to play drums, so Tony was playing with him as well. They're both just stalwart human beings and great musicians. And the thing I didn't know about Tony was he could sing, which was a real surprise. So we were 2021 of November. We all got together finally. We'd been doing some recordings because of COVID, we're recording long distance. In fact, the first recording we did was Long Distance Love, which is this great Lowell George song. And I wanted to hear what Tony would do with that. We had a very good drummer with us, Gabe Ford, but I just felt like maybe we wanted to expand a bit, and we did. And Tony's just both of them have just been exemplary members of the band, and I don't think there's anything. Fred Tackett said, "No, there's not anything we can't play anymore." And I go, "That's right. That was not anything on anybody that's been in the band before. It's just that these guys come in with an amazing amount of chops that are above and beyond. So it's sky's the limit, so to speak."
That leads me to my next question about it was that, they both fill roles that were sort of previously by, other members of the band. But what new things do you think they bring to the band?
Well, I think that their musicianship first and foremost, and this is the discovery process that any band goes through, right? You think you know people, and then you sit down and you start playing music, and that's where we actually speak to one another beyond what we're doing now, conversing in whatever language we use. Music is a terrific language, and a great the acumen that it takes to play Little Feat's music in general is you got to be pretty well versed in a large amount of genres. If you can speak, let's say, mercenary territory, the odds are you're going to do pretty well with a day or night. If you can have a conversation with Oh Atlanta, I think you got a pretty good chance of playing old folks boogie and that kind of stuff. So, but where Little Feat resides in general, which will actually answer your question, which is what they bring is a freedom for me as a writer, and we're allowing everybody to write. We'll see what gets on the records that we're making. But the freedom to write is everything what we've always done. We've always mixed and matched genres in songs. Sometimes we stick to a straight ahead, well, this is a rock and roll song. Charlie Watts on the 2 and 4 drums, as in Oh Atlanta, that kind of thing. But there's always these little side trips we do, the passing tones and whatnot. These guys are very quick. I watch Scott Gerard play guitar some nights. I'm just like, my gosh, what did he just do? They're bringing a lot of fun to this operation as well. They're just, John Coltrane talks about the last band that he had and the musicianship involved. It didn't denigrate anything that came before it, nor does this. We're not in a position ourselves to try and compare ourselves. The audience will compare us to whomever they want to compare. We have a long history for that. But at the root of what we're doing and what we've always done, I felt, was to honor those that came before us. That's the best we could do. You're not going to replace Lowell George, Richie Hayward, or Paul Barrere. But do you honor them while you're up there? And do they still speak their language and tap people in their hearts? And so far we're doing that, I think, and their heads too. And I think it's a good place to call it Little Feat. And after 54 years of doing this, to still call it Little Feat.
Absolutely. Great perspective. And Bill, you recently finished, as you just mentioned, the tour that was a celebration of the 45th anniversary of Waiting for Columbus. So you mentioned having the new members of the band. What was the fan reception like on that last tour? It was obviously a successful tour.
It was, what I enjoyed was walking into the hall and playing, walking out to the stage and looking at people's faces. And it's like, this expectation of like, oh gosh, I hope this is good. I've heard it's good. And some are like, it better be good, that kind of thing. But I thought, you know what? You're going to enjoy it. I didn't say that to them. I said, just hang on. We're going to take you on a little journey. We're all going on a journey tonight. And that's really what we do anyway. But we played South London if you don't mind me going off on a direction here,
No, not at all.
when we put Little Feet back together for Let It Roll, which is like I call like the second incarnation of the band. Um, well, maybe the third if it was Roy Estrada. Then, but we're in South London, and we walked out on stage with Bonnie Raitt with us, and every man, woman, and child in this South London theater that we were playing, they had their arms crossed like this, and they're looking up at the stage. We're about 6 feet up, and they weren't smiling. They were like, "Prove it." And I looked at them with a smile on my face. I go, "We're ready." So as the concert went on, their hands went like this to dropping to their sides to shooting straight up in the air at the end, and they were up in the air for 25 minutes after we left the stage. That's what you want. And we've been doing a lot of that. We did a lot of that on that tour that you just mentioned for Waiting for Columbus. It's a suggestion that's been made to me over the years to go out and tour that album. I thought, oh gosh, I don't know. I wasn't really sure if we should. It's an iconic album. You better have your ducks in a row, so to speak, if you're going to do it. But with a new band coming out of COVID, I thought it was absolutely the perfect idea. Brian Penix brought it to my attention. He's one of our managers, along with Ken Levitan, with Vector in Nashville. I thought it was a sterling idea, and I said, you know what? Let's do it. But we started off by playing a couple of months of just requests. So people wanted to hear Truck Stop Girl. They wanted to hear Strawberry Flats. They wanted, Gunboat Will. They wanted to hear all the odd tunes. And that was actually a very good way for us to start our handshake with each other as a band.
I love that. And I mean, you've mentioned, Bill, that it's a journey, and you're about to continue that journey later in the year where you're starting the albums tour. So you're covering off the recent deluxe edition releases of Sailin Shoes and Dixie Chicken. What's motivated you to get out there so quick in celebration of those albums? Are you doing it to get the new guys to learn all the classic material, or I assume there's a lot of demand to see you guys?
They knew the material before we did. We didn't discuss what songs we were going to play, so they were in there. They're like custodians of music, really. I call them kids, but they're not. I mean, Tony's 53, 54. Scott is 43, 44. But I'm 74, so the kids, to me, what they do is they come in and they're well aware of what the music is. Would you mind if I showed you what this album looks like?
Oh, please do. Yeah.
I don't want to be a huckster here, but this is the Sailin Shoes that is being released by Warner's.
Oh, wow.
It's a great looking product.
Yeah.
It's all this sort of weighing it across.
The full gatefold sleeve. Yeah.
Now there's Dixie Chicken. I won't go through the whole 9 yards with it, but just the way the colors are popping off the screen.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary. The music's doing the same thing. Somebody said they listened to those records, CDs the other day, and the hair was standing up on their arms. I said, that's the reaction I had the first time I heard Waiting for Columbus in the studio. Now, they're also selling vinyl. I'm taking a long-winded way to answer your question, David, which is to say that the reason we're doing this is because Warner's came to us and came to the Vector management. They said, are you okay if we talk about doing re-releases? And so on those re-releases, we were like, well, gosh, yeah, that'd be cool. Warner's. It's nice to be with Warner's again. I'm going to put on my glasses here so people know this is legitimately. I'm not some sort of AI thing here. This with Dixie Chicken, there's like 3 iterations of music going on here. So there's the album itself, which is remastered. The CD number 2 has hot takes, outtakes, and rarities, right? So these are different sort of, they're tracks that were on there. Actually, El Dorado Slim, that is not on there. Look at the main album. I don't remember Juliet being on this. But then I don't remember where I was yesterday. Okay, there it is. But they also have, on the third iteration, it says, live at Paul's Mall, Massachusetts, April 1st, 1973.
Wow.
Well, that is cool. I got to tell you, too, same thing as with this iteration of this beautiful artwork by Neon Park, for those that are unfamiliar with Neon. Neon's part of this from this earth as well, but his artwork is going to live for a long, long time. The third iteration of the text on the back is from this concert we played in Los Angeles, August 28th, 1971, live at the Palladium. And George Carlin was the MC that night, as I recall.
Oh, wow.
So that was kind of cool. I wrote something about Richie and I for Sailin Shoes, if I may read it to you.
Yeah.
I didn't do the liner notes, but I wanted to write about what we were going through at the time. I said, what is striking to me is the absolute lack of inhibition. Richie and I are like two unleashed tornadoes, crisscrossing each other's paths, gathering momentum that is unceasing and somehow, most importantly, disarming. There's an exhilarating tumble and pull to what we're playing that invades somehow self-indulgence. What we were doing, what we were privileged to do, was play whatever we wanted to do. We were ecstatic because we were being paid to do it, and it was like our own little clubhouse. But when you listen to the album Sailin Shoes, it's tight and compact. It sounds like a record. None of that exploratory stuff is on there. But that's part of what we were doing, warming up to play that album. That's what I love about Warner Brothers and why in 2023, 2022, 2021, I still have a love in my heart for that company that allowed that exploration with a group of guys that were just getting rolling. It's our second album. And, we're just kids, man. We were allowed to have fun, allowed to check things out. And Richie and I went full bore with it. So it was pretty cool.
And Bill, what was your level of involvement with the remasters? So how did that process work?
I was not involved in it. I haven't listened to it quite yet. I've been out touring, and I went back east to do some writing with Tony and Scott on some things in preparation for stuff. I'm writing a book called Carnival Ghosts. And that book is about 40,000 words into it, and I've just now met Lowell George. So it's about my life. It involves Little Feat, of course, but there's a lot there. So
Yes.
I've been kind of busy. But I was in New York, and I did hear some of the tracks in New York because I did an on-camera interview for Warner's. I was using it as a promo for the record. I had a ball doing that. We're also making a documentary of Little Feat with a fellow named Jesse Lauder, who we really like. He was just out talking to Liz George and R. George. He's got, I think Jackson Brown's been interviewed, and a bunch of people. So there's a lot of very cool and interesting things going on for the band finally, and with new management, and just new players, and that handshake with our past is primarily real and I think heartfelt for people that see us. I mean, I might believe in it with all my heart, but if people, you're not going to fool an audience when you walk into an auditorium to play. If they don't feel that this is Little Feat, you're going to know. Part of the emphasis that I took, I'm sorry to go on these long-winded answers here, but that's why I'm writing this book. In 1966, I was living in Santa Maria, California. I was going to go up to the Rose, and I did go to the Rose Gardens in Pismo Beach, which is about 25 miles north of, um, of Santa Maria. I wanted to hear the Yardbirds. I thought I was going to hear Jeff Beck. We get in there and they start to play. Jeff Beck is not on stage with them. And we're like, where are they? What's going on? And we're getting upset. And then we started listening to what they're playing, and we just shut up immediately. It was the guitar player was Jimmy Page.
Wow.
And I went, okay, got it. Well, when I was thinking about whether we should put Little Feat back together, Paul and I were talking about it, you know, 68, 70, 20 years, some 20 years later, I remembered going to hear the Yardbirds. And I said, look, again, you can't replace Lowell. If you have something that actually fits and honors the cat and still sounds like Little Feat, I think we have a shot of doing this. And we selfishly, we've always used Little Feat, even when Lowell's with us, as a platform to speak music, to write music that speaks to our souls, which covers a wide range of genres, of iterations of splitting genres together, would be it jazz and rock and roll, jam music like in Tri-Face Boogie that Richie and I wrote. Only song that Richie ever wrote, by the way. We did the lyrics for it. And I was writing on Lowell's mother's, this blonde piano that she had a real loud sound to it. And we hadn't yet trashed it, but we shortly thereafter did, not on purpose, but just for trying to cart it over to gigs and stuff. But that sound was what, for me, created that boogie thing that I threw in there. And probably a year later, maybe less, we had played a festival over in Hawaii. And I'm upstairs at the coming home back to Long Beach, not where I live, but where we had our next concert. Now I'm upstairs thinking, how do we play this song where we actually start to really jam on it? I thought, well, let Richie and I jam on it. That way, I'm not going to be stuck in the key of E or A. I can take it anywhere I want. And then when I get to a certain point, I go, boom, da 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 da, and everybody else comes in. So that's kind of the technique and devices that I used pretty early on to view how we played our music. And I wasn't the only one doing it. Lowell had that acumen as well, and we all did. So it was
Absolutely. Fun. And that's probably a great juncture to ask you, Bill. So do you have a particular songwriting process when you're writing new music, and has that changed for you over the years?
It has, but one of the things that I'm using now, I think it's right back. This is so great being able to demonstrate. This is called a Zoom recorder.
They're great.
They're incredible. And a guy that I write music with here in Montana, Tom Garnsey. Tom and he bought that for me. He gave it to me. And shortly thereafter, I started writing songs with Robert Hunter from the Grateful Dead. We wrote 20 songs. So one of the things that would evade me in the old days was I'd be going, da 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 da, da 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 da. What is that? Oh, that's Beethoven's Fifth. Okay, forget that. And I try to remember what Beethoven's Fifth was 5 minutes later, and I go, da 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 da. No, it's da 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 da. Anyway, with that, I could just plug it in and play it, and I know where I am, right? That's how I wrote 20 songs with Robert Hunter. I've written 9 songs with, maybe more than that, with Paul Muldoon, who's a Pulitzer Prize winning poet from Ireland, who teaches at Princeton. He held the chopped chair at Oxford. He's a zany guy, and we've got a lot of music. So I'm writing with Charlie Starr from Blackberry Smoke, John Leventhal, who's married to Roseanne Cash. I'm going to be writing with the band. Tony and I have started some stuff. Tony Scott and I have started stuff. Fred Tackett will dive in. That's really what has changed, is the ability for me, at any rate, to say, I know exactly where I am in the process of writing, whereas before we really had to kind of keep as focused as we could, and sometimes as high as we were back in the 70s, it was a little difficult to do so. But I really learned how to write music writing with Robert Hunter, and that's at full knowledge. I wrote Ringo, Oh Atlanta, uh, Strawberry Flats. Just I've written a lot of songs. I'm not denigrating any of that. It's just the process, which is your question, David.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant answer, Bill. That nails it perfectly. So it probably leads into another question. You just mentioned how many people you've written music with, and let alone recorded with, and it's nearly impossible to list them all. But I wanted to ask you a couple of questions, sort of in that area. That whether it's Bob Seger, Brian Adams, Emmylou Harris, Doobie Brothers, Jackson Brown. What do you think they're looking for when they call you to work with them?
Well, what I hope they're looking for is somebody that can deliver, first and foremost, and that they know that I'm capable and will listen to direction. Uh, but they also know that what they're going to get out of me is I'm a better keyboard player than they are, more than likely, and and that is a guy that in a band, in a great band, that I bring that mentality with me. I don't have to be in Bonnie Raitt's band or Jackson Brown's band or Pink Floyd's band to play like I'm in a band. That comes as a part of who I am as an individual. Yes, I'm a studio player, so I'm a pro on top of it all. Uh, I can cut to the chase on anything from writing charts to. Paul Simon once asked me, he said, he was going around, it was rehearsals for coming to Australia and New Zealand, in fact, with Simon and Garfunkel in 1984, I believe. And what we did, when he and I were talking about it, I saw him every day going up to people, play this, do this, blah, blah, blah. He's really good at it. And I said, guys, he's got 50 ways to do it. I'm going to figure out 54. So by the time he got to me, he says, let's do this, that. I got, Paul, hang on a second. What you did 5 minutes ago was this. Might we marry that up with what we just did three takes ago, or what you were talking about three iterations ago? Let me marry that up with what I want to do, which is this. And he looked at me and says, you don't need any help, and walked away. I just wanted it to be clear with him that I am listening intently to this. I want to be a part of who he is, what he wants. I was the only West Coast guy that was asked to go back on tour with him. But I was working with James Taylor, so I had to respectfully pass.
That leads into my question that I was going to ask about what input you give, when you do these sessions. I mean, the arrangements, the choosing sounds and instruments and doing all those kinds of things with the various artists. How much do you tend to do that, or does it depend? What does it depend on?
It's all these questions are great, so thank you both. I got to say that what I don't want to do is I'm not going to ever sit there and have an artist say, "Hey, do this," which I will try. I'll try anything they want, basically. But I'm going to say, look, might I try this as well? I'm not sure this is working. This may not be something that I would play on a Hammond B3 organ. This might be better suited for a Wurlitzer, or maybe let me try both. But let's start off with the Wurlitzer first, if that's okay with you. And then play a little bit for them and then let them go, oh yeah, that's exactly what we should do. Or, rarely, but sometimes they'll say, maybe all we need is a B3. And I said, well, let me just go out and play the B3 then. Let's just try that. So I want them to know that they've got a partner in crime here. I'm there to facilitate what their music, how they hear and see their music. I think we do a little bit of both. We hear it and see it. And I want to be the vessel that helps them get there.
Partners in crime's a great analogy, and I'm wondering Bill, over those years, and I know there are so many sessions, so it'll be hard to recall, but are there some standout sessions where that partners in crime sort of approach, you felt it really paid off even on top of what it normally does?
I think working with Bonnie Raitt a few times was one of those where we were able to, I think it was on Home Plate and Taking My Time, were two really nice records, and just were expansive in the way we were allowed to play. I think working with Bob Seger, first time I worked with him was on the song Against the Wind. And I didn't play the piano, I played the B3 part, the whole notes, that's what they wanted, and I thought it sounded good. That's what I played. When I played on Hollywood Nights, now we're getting into something that's like digging down into it, literally, hitting the keyboard hard, hitting that rhythm to where it just like propels you through that song. If you're driving a car, you're going to be going well over the speed limit. That kind of thing. That's when those things work. And I wasn't on most of the stuff. I was there after the fact, after the tracks were already cut. You know, the trick when you're in a session with, I recorded with Bryan Adams and with Sting, and that whoever else we had on those dates was over in London. I played on Everything I Do for You, which is the first time I worked with him, but that was just overdubbing, right? So I was called back to work with Chris Kimsey, who used to, I believe, engineer and produced a couple Stones records. And Sting was playing bass. We are going to do it with Brian. It was for the movie The Three Musketeers. So let's go from Robin Hood to The Three Musketeers. Hello, Hollywood. So we're in there, and Sting is obviously Sting. He can play anything. I was getting there just a little quicker than he was, but I just thought, you know what, I'm going to just back it off a couple notches and you have to let everybody kind of rise to the occasion at the same time. That's all. And then they did a little work on it after I left. And so I got called back around 2 or 3 in the morning. And Chris goes, almost in a gleeful way, it was like, we changed the key to the song. I go, okay, so what were we doing in before? B? Yes, we're playing B flat now. I said, okay. I walked out there and boom, nailed it. I came back in. Chris looks at me. I go, Chris, is everything okay? You look almost, I don't know, disappointed. He said, how'd you do that so quickly? I said, well, Bonnie Raitt used to record. She recorded a couple songs written by Sippy Wallace. One of them, which was called "It's Easy If You Know How." I said, getting beyond that, look, a B flat is a B, an F is an F sharp, a G is, an F would be an E, excuse me. That G would be an F sharp or a G flat. I mean, however you want to work it. But I've been playing music for a long, long time, and not just rock and roll. I studied classical music, so I'm not a classical pianist. I'm not going to play a concert at Carnegie Hall playing some Bach fugues, but I can at least play them. I read them, and I've got a piano I'm sitting next to that has a lot of music I sit down to play. So I wasn't showing off. I just it is not any big secret here. It's just, I think he just wanted to twist my tail a little bit.
Yes.
That's what he was disappointed about. Sorry, Chris.
Leading into it, or coming from that, talking about, I think a lot of people think of you as primarily a piano and organ player, mostly in blues rock, that sort of thing. But your use of synthesizers goes back to at least 1973, at least,
Yeah.
Because you played synth on "Kiss It Off" on Dixie Chicken, which is a pretty wild song, and you played synth on your solo, the Fat Man solo on "Waiting for Columbus." And so I was wondering what you could tell us about your choice of instruments, through the years, and what made you start playing synths in a context of a band that, again, most people thought of as a, rock and American band and that sort of thing, and you kind of went far out with it. And also, up to the present day, what you're doing now with instruments.
Well, Bob Margoloff and Cecil Malcolm, or Malcolm Cecil, I guess, were on. They'd worked with Stevie Wonder on his records. They were the people that were programming the synth sounds for me on Kiss It Off. I was not sure that I wanted to play a synthesizer, to be honest with you. But when I heard what they were doing and I started to relate it to the piano, right? In terms of if we had one piano in that room, now I went out and played it. Let's bring in Mac Rabenak, Dr. John to play that instrument. Let's get Jackson Brown to play it. Clyde Gieseking or Glenn Gould or somebody from the classical field. That would probably sound like 4 or 5 different instruments, just the piano. So if you're playing a synthesizer and you have some control over the way it sounds, where you're not simply having him control the sound, that it seemed to me to open up a lot of doors, right? That's what piqued my interest to playing. Playing synth. I went into it after that with not I don't think they had multiphonic synthesizers, polyphonic synths back then. So it was just one note at a time. So I went to a mini Moog, which is what I played on that, one of the albums, I guess. I used a filter pedal, and I also used that filter pedal with what was polyphonic, which was an Oberheim synth. Now, I think I had 4 voices. I think you could, if you had the money, you could have 8 voices. So it was one of those kind of deals. But I was schooled in by my teacher, Ruth Newman, who I reference a lot in this book, in the early going, with not only teaching me piano and all the basics to piano, but you're studying Bach and Beethoven and Brahms and Rachmaninoff on up and down, Chopin. But you're also, she introduced me to the pipe organ. So a 4 or 5 manual pipe organ, as I recall, there's stuff about maybe it was only 3 manuals. I thought it was more. But whatever it was, the amount of sounds that you could get from the pistons that were these metal objects you push with your foot that would bring out the stops, which were the actual sounds of the organ. Or you'd use the 3 pedals, which had a crescendo pedal that would bring out enough, and every one of those stops that would make the church literally vibrate when you play it. For an 11-year-old kid going in there in fact, I was 10 when I first started playing the pipe organ. That was really something, a lot of power in that, right? So what I like about, let's let it roll, right? Not many people know that synthesizers on there. If I was to press, and I've talked to horn players, I go, what do you think, real or Memorex? They go, they sound real. I go, that's synthesizers, but what it makes it sound real are 2 things. One is I didn't do any swoops. You notice in about a nanosecond that it was a synth. But the other thing I did was another parlor trick was George Massenburg and I had Fred Tackett double a trumpet part on top. There's your real instrument, the identifiable instrument that makes it sound like the real thing, and everything else is. But Massenburg's got a great sound. I had a very, I thought, adept way of writing the horn chart and playing it, and I defied people to tell me what I was doing. Same with when I'm playing an acoustic piano or am I playing a synthesized piano. People can tell me. If you go in knowing off the top, it kind of puts people off. So I don't often say, "Hey, I'm playing a synth piano on this record." Let them figure it out. I mean, it's I don't really care. It's I I just want to do something that people can hear when I play live. And I'm not knocking Bruce Hornsby, and never would, for bringing an acoustic piano out on stage. That's a lot of work, brother, and nothing I'm going to get my career to do. So uh, I'm gonna do the other thing and play a synth piano. Just take people on a journey, which I do to this day when I get up there with Tommy Emmanuel, who's now living in Nashville, but he's a product of Australia and a treasure, by the way. uh, I'll have voices that do up. I'll play with him and then run into a piano part. That guy can play anything. He is. You just what music is about for me, fellas, is it's about, again, that exploratory thing I was telling you about with Richie and I earlier. Having the means and the wherewithal to explore, try things. If they work, try them again, build upon them, uh, have other players that are world class join Little Feat. And we do it through a bed of music that is just, you might not hear anybody else do Red Streamliner. I don't know, or Cold, Cold, Cold. It's possible. But you're going to hear a lot of people try Spanish Moon, for example. And it doesn't knock any one of those songs, but they are Little Feat songs that when you hear people do, oh God, that kind of sounds like Little Feat, you know? There's a sound that's in the way the songs are structured, the way they're written, the way the chords sort of collide, and with the bass movement throughout them. It's there's a lot of great music out there, and I'm proud to say that Little Feat has been a part of that vocabulary. I love the same things you guys do. I mean, give me Wayne Shorter every day. I'll listen to him, man. I'll listen to Miles Davis. I'll listen to Glenn Gould, John Coltrane. I don't care. I mean, I love the band, Leon Russell, who in Melbourne, Australia, I had a chance to come up to and thank him for the influence he had on me as a kid.
Wow.
And for you in Houston, Joe, I was talking to Greg Allman, and we were talking about that date we did in Houston at the Summit when Dwayne was alive, and it was playing this slide guitar. And I said, Greg, I got to tell you that evening, and I'm just going back in time. I said, that evening that I heard the Allman Brothers and you guys were playing, as good a slide player as Lowell was, I thought Dwayne just I just thought he was that much better. Not a lot, but I mean, he was better with his tone and everything else, but he'd been playing a lot longer than Lowell, too. Those guys were with a group, by the way, called the Hourglass. Now, I'm writing about this in my book, not about them specifically, but I do mention the group, that they're both in it, at a club in Ventura, California, where I grew up and moved away from it and came back. It was called The Back Door. And Bob Jones, a blues player himself, white guy, that club was only open in 1968. And everybody and their brother that was blues played it, and some top-notch folk acts played it. But that's where I met Taj Mahal, was at that club. And so, yeah, man, that's that community of music that Little Feat's a firm part of. I wasn't in Little Feat back then, I guarantee you, but I was in search of Little Feat back then. That's what this book is about. And then it really starts to nail down what we're talking about, which is this community that we're all a part of as listeners, as players, as songwriters, of people that play other people's songs. We're just talking about music. That's all.